Hello and welcome back to I Completed 80s Music with me, the 80s Mixtaper. Today we get into the back half of Playlist 31 with the music of November 1981. But before we do so, as you know, we love your musings, corrections and memories on this pod, and this week we had an outpouring of love across all social media for Roxy Music's Jealous Guy, and for the first time ever, quite a few international likes as well. Here's a sample. Kim White 989 said she loves it. Sean T Ward 039 said pure class and so cool. Stevie B 09024 said the only song that I ever think has been sung better than Lennon. Absolutely awesome. Antonella 76 says questo sia un pezzo stupendo, which loosely translates to what a wonderful piece. Juan Castilla Ale says pura y genuina clase, which I think means pure and genuine class. And St John Park said great cover with 3 distinct solos. There can be no doubt that Brian Ferry is the suavest gentleman alive, I think it's fair to say. It's difficult to describe him. If he was your dad, you would of course expect him to reek of eau sauvage and either have a very passionate relationship with your mum or be a philandering git. And if you were a man who met Brian, you could totally understand if your wife started an affair with him. He is just classy masculinity personified. I digress. If you want to contact the show, you can find us on your socials as the 80s Mixtaper, that's 80S. Or if you're old school like me and want to email in any memories, which we'll happily read out on the pod, you can email in to completed80s@aol.com. Again, that's 80S. So what do we have in store today? Well, we finally made it into November 1981, and as we hurtle towards a chilly winter, we've got some songs to warm your soul. In this episode, we introduce the final part of the Sheffield synth pop trio and the dapper Martin Fry, ABC. Rush have their massive 80s moment with a song which will ripple through movie soundtracks through to Family Guy and the Goldbergs. And we also start to get Japan's weird and wonderful output from their enigmatic album Tin Drum, amongst others. As always, due to copyright laws, we can't actually play the songs on the pod, but if you go into the episode description, you will find playlists for both Spotify and Apple Music already linked up. And if those links don't work on your podcast platform of choice, there is also a full track listing. So let's not stand on ceremony, let's get back to the music. So, we kick off today with some funk. The last time we talked about Kool and the Gang, it was late 1980, pretty much a year earlier, and they were riding high on Celebration, that inescapable party anthem from their album Celebrate, produced by Eumir Deodato. The song hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, spent weeks at the top of the R&B chart, and went platinum, becoming a go-to for everything from weddings to sports victories. It even played on the International Space Station years later, as Robert Kool Bell noted in a Grammy interview. So what did the band do next? They kept the groove going with their 13th studio album, Something Special, released in September 1981 on D-Light Records, distributed by Polygram. And kicking it off was Steppin' Out, a slick mid-tempo funk track that urged listeners to hit the town with style. This is track 8, Playlist 31, press play now. Steppin' Out was the lead single in the UK, dropping on the 31st of October 1981, and it climbed to number 12 on the charts, spending several weeks in the rankings. In the US, it was released later, entering the Billboard Hot 100 at number 89 in February 1982, its peak position, while faring better on the R&B chart at number 12. The song opens the album with an infectious bass line and horns that echoed the band's signature style, and written collectively by Kool and the Gang, it showcased their group composition style. Taylor's smooth vocals lead the charge, singing lines like Steppin' Out with My Baby, evoking a night on the town vibe. So as it's been a while, let's just recap the Kool story. Kool and the Gang formed in 1964 in Jersey City, New Jersey as the Jazziacs, a teenage jazz group led by brothers Robert Kool Bell and Ronald Bell. They evolved through funk hits in the 70s like Jungle Boogie and Hollywood Swinging, but by the late 1970s they were pivoting to pop funk to stay relevant amid disco's dominance. In 1979, they linked up with Brazilian producer Eumir Deodato for Ladies' Night, their breakthrough with lead singer JT Taylor. As Robert Bell explained in a Grammy.com interview, we figured out that working with Deodato, we'd do a jazzier album. But it was less jazz and more pop. Deodato's touch turned their sound platinum. Ladies' Night went platinum, followed by Celebrate in 1980. Something Special was the third in this Deodato-produced trilogy, recorded at the House of Music Studios. George Brown said, "Deodato acknowledged my writing and took it to another level. Everything we worked on with him went platinum." The album hit number 1 on the Billboard R&B charts, number 10 on the Hot 200, and earned platinum certification by RIAA for over 1 million US sales. It was their first to chart in the UK at number 10, going gold there by spring in 1982. While Steppin' Out wasn't the biggest hit from the album, that honour goes to Get Down On It, another song which we'll be hearing very soon. It set the tone. In the US, Take My Heart was the lead single, topping the R&B chart for the 6th time. But in the UK, Steppin' Out led, building on prior top 20s like Celebration, which reached number 7. The track's music video featured the band in performance mode, emphasising their live energy. This era solidified Kool and the Gang's crossover appeal, blending funk roots with pop polish. As Brown said of Deodato, it was like he had a magic wand. The song embodied their formula, feel-good dance tracks with horns and grooves. It was re-released on compilations, affirming its lasting vibe. In a broader view, Something Special extended their hot streak amid 80s R&B shifts, before later hits like Joanna in 1983. Ronald Bell, who passed in 2020, was key to their songwriting. George Brown died in 2023. Today, the band tours with originals like Robert Bell. Stepping Out reminds us of how they kept stepping forward after Celebration, proving funk could evolve without losing its soul. So for our next track, it's time to introduce another act to the British metal renaissance. We've had Judas Priest and Whitesnake. Soon enough, we'll introduce Iron Maiden. But before then, it's time to introduce another band. It's a single that roared out of the early 80s British metal scene like a freight train barrelling through the smog. It's Princess of the Night by Saxon from their 1981 album Denim and Leather. This song captures the raw, high-octane energy of heavy metal's resurgence in the UK, with its galloping riffs, soaring vocals and lyrics that paint a vivid picture of power and loss. It's not just a headbanger, this one, it's a tribute to something mechanical and mighty, wrapped in the denim and leather ethos that defined the era's fans and bands alike. But more on that in a bit. For now, let's let the song do the talking. This is track 9. If that didn't get your blood pumping, check your pulse. Saxon formed in 1977 in Barnsley, a working-class town in South Yorkshire. Originally called Son of a Bitch, the group came together from members of 2 local acts, vocalist Peter Biff Byford and guitarist Paul Quinn from Coast, joining guitarists Graham Oliver, bassist Steve Dobby Dawson and drummer Pete Gill from the earlier Son of a Bitch lineup. Barnsley was a coal mining area and several band members including Byford had worked in collieries or factories before pursuing music full-time. They changed their name to Saxon in 1978 to avoid radio censorship issues, drawing inspiration from the historical invaders of England for a tough, no-nonsense image. The late 1970s were a difficult period for heavy music in Britain. Punk had dominated, pushing older acts like Black Sabbath into the background, but a grassroots revival was brewing in pubs and clubs. Saxon gigged relentlessly on the UK circuit, building a loyal following through sheer persistence. They signed with Carrere Records, a French label, after being rejected by most major UK companies. Their self-titled debut album arrived in 1979, blending hard rock with emerging metal edges, but it didn't chart highly. It was raw and energetic tracks like Stallions of the Highway, hinting at their potential. Breakthrough came in 1980 with Wheels of Steel, recorded in just a few weeks at a Dutch studio. The album hit number 5 on the UK charts, fueled by singles like the title track and 747 Strangers in the Night, a song I totally regret not featuring on this pod, which showcased their anthemic style. They followed it quickly with Strong Arm of the Law later that year, another top 10 hit, solidifying their sound with songs like the title. By this point, Saxon had toured extensively, supporting acts like Motorhead and Ozzy Osbourne, and headlining their own shows. This rise placed Saxon at the forefront of the new wave of British heavy metal, a movement that exploded around 1979 to 1981. Coined by journalist Jeff Barton in Sounds magazine, the new wave described a surge of young DIY bands revitalising heavy metal with faster tempos, twin guitar attacks and fantasy-tinged lyrics, countering punk's dominance. Saxon, alongside Iron Maiden, Def Leppard, Diamond Head and Venom, embodied this wave from northern England's industrial heartlands. They weren't the flashiest. Maiden had theatricality, Leppard had the pop hooks, but Saxon's blue-collar grit and road-tested anthems made them new wave pillars. Their success helped the movement gain traction, with 8 UK top 40 albums in the 1980s, including 4 top 10 entries. The new wave of British heavy metal influenced global metal, paving the way for thrash and beyond, and Saxon toured Europe and Japan, spreading the sound. By 1981, Saxon channeled this momentum into Denim and Leather, their 4th album, released in October on Carrere. Produced by Nigel Thomas, it peaked at number 9 in the UK and celebrated the band's fan base, the Denim and Leather army of metalheads. Princess of the Night opens the record, a 4-minute blast clocking in at around 107 BPM, with Quinn and Oliver's harmonised guitars driving the verses and Byford's raspy howl on the chorus. Released as a single in the UK, it charted at number 57, so not their biggest hit, but an interesting one. The song's story, it's not about a royal temptress or a fantasy figure. It's a love letter to a steam locomotive. Specifically, it references the LMS Princess Royal class, a line of powerful British steam engines from the 1930s, weighing over 100 tons and capable of high speeds. Lyrics like, "She used to be an iron horse 20 years ago," and 90 tons of thunder lighting up the sky evoke the machine's glory and its sad scrapping in the diesel era. Byford penned it, drawing from his youth near railways in West Yorkshire. As he told Louder in 2018, "I wanted to do a song about a steam train because that was something I was really into when I was growing up in West Yorkshire. A few of us in the band had worked in a colliery and we used to ride the trains that carried the coal. So it's a song about a steam train that ends up in the scrapyard. Fans sometimes misinterpret it as about a woman or a car, but Byford has consistently set the record straight." Denim and Leather marks Saxon's new wave peak before lineup changes and a shift towards arena rock in the mid-1980s. But Princess of the Night endures as a staple in their live sets, a testament to that era's unpretentious power. If you're digging deeper, check those early albums. They're the blueprint for metal's working man's spirit. Sticking with the industrial north, we now introduce another important synth pop outfit. In 1981, the pop landscape was crackling with electronic innovation, especially out of the UK's industrial north. Synth pop was breaking through, blending cold machines with human emotion, and no city embodied that more than Sheffield, a steel town hit hard by recession and unemployment, where bands were forging futuristic sounds. Amid this scene emerged ABC, a group that fused synths with funk and soul, standing alongside the Human League and Heaven 17 as part of Sheffield's synth-pop triad. These 3 acts define the era. The Human League, formed in 1977 as an experimental electronic outfit, split in 1980 when Martin Ware and Ian Craig Marsh left to create Heaven 17, leaving Phil Oakey to rebuild with hits like Love Action. Heaven 17 brought politically charged synth funk, while ABC added glamorous romantic flair. Together, they turned Sheffield's gritty backdrop into a hotbed of polished pop ambition. ABC's debut single captured that style perfectly. This is Tears Are Not Enough, track 10 today. ABC evolved from Vice Versa, an electronic act started in 1977 by synthesizer players Stephen Singleton and Mark White in Sheffield, South Yorkshire. White handled lead vocals initially. They released an EP called Music 4 on their own Neutron Records label and made their debut gig opening for the post-punk band Wire at Sheffield University. Martin Fry, born in Stretford, Manchester, but based in Sheffield, where he studied English, ran a fanzine called Modern Drugs. He interviewed Vice Versa for it, but then soon joined as a synthesizer player. By late 1980, the group had transformed into ABC, with Fry stepping up as lead vocalist. Their final performance as Vice Versa was at the Futurama 2 Festival in Leeds in September 1980. From then on, it was ABC, Singleton on saxophone, White on guitar and keyboards. Early in the new year, they added Mark Lickley on bass guitar and David Robinson on drums. ABC drew from the competitive Sheffield scene, home to acts like Cabaret Voltaire, Clock DVA and the Human League, but carved their own path by blending raw electronics with influences from James Brown, funk, soul and David Bowie's Station to Station. Vice Versa had been confrontational, but as ABC they shifted from harsh synth rackets to funky angst-ridden British pop. So the story of Tears Are Not Enough starts with ABC's evolution. It was their debut single, released on the 16th of October 1981 through Neutron Records, distributed by Mercury in both 7-inch and 12-inch formats. Produced by Steve Brown, it's a spare funk tune where Fry sings about tears alone aren't proof of genuine emotion in a relationship. Lyrics like "Tears for souvenirs, tears are not enough" contend that crying doesn't confirm real feelings. The ideas stem from the band's love of funk and soul, mixed with British angst, inspired by Bowie's fusion of poetry, electronics and rhythm on Station to Station. The single introduced ABC to the public, peaking at number 19 on the UK singles chart. In the US, it later appeared as the B-side to Poison Arrow. This success paved the way for their debut album, The Lexicon of Love, in 1982, where the song was re-recorded with producer Trevor Horn and lavish string arrangements by Anne Dudley of The Art of Noise. Horn brought in Dudley since ABC had no keyboard player, but the 1981 original stands as ABC's raw entry point, born from Sheffield's experimental grit and their drive to stand out in a crowded, competitive scene. It marks ABC's shift towards the glamorous pop that would eventually define them. Alright folks, the next song is a biggie in the early decade. We are back with Rush. The last time we met the band, it was all the way back in early 1980 and we dove into Rush's The Spirit of Radio from their album Permanent Waves, a track that captured the band's evolving sound, blending their prog rock roots with more accessible radio-friendly elements while critiquing the commercialisation of music. It marked a turning point for the Canadian trio Geddy Lee, Alex Lifeson and Neil Peart as they shifted towards tighter song structures and incorporated synthesizers more prominently. Building on that momentum, Rush headed into the studio for their follow-up Moving Pictures, released in February 1981. This album would become their best-selling, going quadruple platinum in the US, and it kicked off with a song that crystallised their new direction, Tom Sawyer. Clocking in at 4 minutes and 36, it's a muscular synth-driven rocker that explores themes of individualism and rebellion in a modern context. The track opens with that iconic Oberheim OBX synthesizer from Lee, backed by Peart's precise drumming and Lifeson's slashing guitar, creating a sound that's both futuristic and grounded in hard rock. Lyrically, it paints a portrait of a modern-day warrior striding through the world with mean pride, untouched by societal pressures. It's become one of Rush's signature anthems, a staple of classic rock radio that's been streamed and downloaded millions of times. But before we get into the backstory, let's let the song speak for itself. Here's Tom Sawyer by Rush. This is an absolute classic. This is track 10, playlist 31. So the story of Tom Sawyer starts in the summer of 1980, during a rehearsal break at Ronnie Hawkins' farm outside Toronto. The band was jamming ideas for what would become Moving Pictures, recorded later that year at Le Studio in Morin Heights, Quebec, with co-producer Terry Brown. The music was composed by bassist vocalist Geddy Lee and guitarist Alex Lifeson, while the lyrics came from a collaboration between drummer Neil Peart and Pi Dubois, the lyricist for fellow Canadian band Max Webster. Dubois had sent Pert a poem originally titled Louis the Warrior, depicting a free-spirited rebel navigating the world. Pert reworked it, drawing inspiration from Mark Twain's 1876 novel The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, which the band members had all studied in school. He transformed it into a modern take on Twain's mischievous, independent character. In a 1985 Rush Backstage Club newsletter, Pert explained, his original lyrics were kind of a portrait of a modern-day rebel, a free-spirited individualist striding through the world, wide-eyed and purposeful. I added the themes of reconciling the boy and man in myself, and the difference between what people are and what people perceive them to be, namely me, I guess. The recording process was fraught with challenges. Geddy Lee later recalled, we had more trouble with that song than almost any other song. I had real doubt about whether the song was working at all. They struggled with the guitar solo sound until engineer Paul Northfield mic'd the stereo speakers for a tubular effect. Lee even switched from his usual Rickenbacker 4001 bass to a Fender Jazz bass, bought from a pawn shop, which gave the track its punchy low end, but initially created a negative association. Lifeson improvised his solo from multiple takes. At one point, the band thought it was the weakest track on the album, but it came alive in the mix. Lee remembered exclaiming, "Holy fuck," upon hearing the bass pedals kick in. Lifeson described its structure as unique for Rush, going from that first verse into a bridge, into a chorus, and into a solo, and then repeating. The song features a 7/8 time signature shift in the instrumental section, a prog staple for the band. Released as a single in May 1981 with Witch Hunt as the B-side, Tom Sawyer peaked at number 44 on the US Billboard Hot 100 and number 8 on the mainstream rock chart, number 24 in Canada, and a live version from Exit Stage Left hit number 25 in the UK. It certified silver in the UK for 200,000 units. Lee called it a defining piece of music from Rush in the early 80s, and it's one of the most played Canadian songs before 1988 on rock radio. It ranked 19th on VH1's 100 Greatest Hard Rock Songs in 2009 and was inducted into the Canadian Songwriters Hall of Fame in 2010. Culturally, Tom Sawyer has permeated pop culture as an emblem of individualism. It opened Rush's 2002 Vapor Trails tour, symbolising resilience after Pert's personal tragedies, the deaths of his daughter and his wife. South Park featured animated shorts of the characters attempting to play it during Rush's 2006 and 2007 tours, with mishaps like wrong lyrics, tying it to Huckleberry Finn. It's appeared in TV shows like Futurama, Chuck, and Family Guy, The Sopranos, Freaks and Geeks, Fringe, Togetherness, City on a Hill, and most recently was celebrated in The Goldbergs. It was in the video game Rock Band 2, and Rush performed it on The Colbert Report in 2008, their first US TV appearance in over 30 years. Covers include versions by The String Cheese Incident, Dead Z, and Mindless Self-Indulgence. Lifeson summed it up. Musically, it's very powerful, and lyrically, it has a spirit that resonates with a lot of people. It's kind of an anthem. It most certainly is. For our penultimate song in this playlist, let's go off-piste. Let's talk about Pigbag's Sunny Day. It's November 1981, and the UK music scene is a frothing cauldron of post-punk experimentation. Think the jagged edges of Gang of Four bleeding into the dubby grooves of a certain ratio. All while the indie labels like Rough Trade are churning out 12 inches that feel like secret handshakes for anyone tuned into John Peel. Pigbag crash into this with an instrumental that's pure daylight funk. Car chase guitars, a horn section that punches like a prize fighter, and a rhythm section that locks in with a kind of loose-limbed precision that screams art school origins. No vocals, just a long sprawl of brash energy on the 12-inch version that makes you want to ditch the grey skies and chase whatever patch of blue you can find. It's their second single, following the surprise underground smash of Papa's Got a Brand New Pigbag, but that won't get mainstream coverage for a while. But Sunny Day is where they start to break through to a wider chart audience, peaking at number 53 on the UK singles chart. Modest by top 40 standards, but a foothold in the mainstream for a band that's barely a year old. This is our track 12. To understand Pigbag, you have to rewind to late 1980 in Cheltenham, a spa town in Gloucestershire that's more known for its Georgian architecture than its underground scene. The band forms out of Cheltenham Art College, where Chris Hamlin, a fashion student who plays clarinet and percussion, is jamming with a loose collection of musicians. Hamlin recruits Roger Freeman on trombone, keyboards and percussion. He's an old friend from Birmingham. Chris Lee on trumpet and steel drums, and James Johnston on alto saxophone and guitar. They expand by adding Andrew Chip Carpenter on drums and percussion, and Mark Smith on bass, both old schoolmates of Johnston from his previous band Hardware. The band's sound coalesces from informal rehearsals at Hamlin's black-painted student house, Beach House, where the walls are thin and the sessions stretch into the night. The lineup shifts early when Mark Smith leaves and Hamlin hears that Simon Underwood has left a band called the Pop Group. Hamlin invites Underwood to join on bass, and Underwood suggests Ollie Moore on tenor and baritone saxophone. It's a 7-piece at this point, fluid and collective, no fixed frontman, just a horn-driven machine that thrives on live chaos. The name Pigbag sticks from Hamlin's shabby cloth bag sporting a screen-printed warthog image, which he lugs everywhere like a talisman. The first recordings happened in 1981 at Berry Street Studios in London, a no-frills spot that captures the raw edge. Dick O'Dell, who runs Y Records, hears them play a 20-minute proto-version of what becomes Papa's Got a Brand New Pigbag at a Bristol gig supporting the Slits. The crowd erupts and O'Dell signs them. That debut single drops in May 1981, an instrumental riff on James Brown's Papa's Got a Brand New Bag, but twisted into a sax-led funk odyssey that clocks in at over 6 minutes on the 12-inch. It doesn't chart nationally, but storms the UK indie chart, peaking at number 2 and selling steadily through Rough Trade's distribution network. By summer, Pigbag are gigging relentlessly. Bristol, London, even a US tour in September and October that hits New York City, Philadelphia, Washington DC, San Francisco and Berkeley. They're outsiders abroad, but the state's melting pot crowds dig that hybrid vibe. Back home, momentum builds. Hamlin feels the pull of the band's rising profile, clashing with their communal ethos. He bolts, feeling that he created an unmanageable group with too many egos to contend with, and that he was losing control of the band. But they rebound fast, cutting Sunny Day as a follow-up. Released in November 1981, it's another Y Records 12-inch. The track keeps the Papa's DNA, bright horns stabbing over a skipping groove, but leans brighter, with Johnston's guitar twinkling like sun on water and Freeman's percussion adding a percolating shimmer. Ed Steinberg shoots the promo video during their US tour. Shots of the band in New York, including at the Peppermint Lounge, a perfect snapshot of their transatlantic spark. It enters the UK indie chart in late October, peaking at number 2 while crossing over to the main singles chart at 53, their first national ink. That groove hits like a rogue sunbeam in a Thatcher-era gloom. Sunny Day is Pigbag distilling their live wire energy into something radio-friendly without sanding off the edges. Recorded amid the Papa's Budge, it captures the band's transitional fever. Hamlin's exit underscores the tensions of scaling up from art college jams to label expectations. Yet the track radiates unforced joy. As their timeline notes, it arrives just as Papa's reissue looms in 1982, and we'll definitely hear it when we reach that point, paving the way for the album Dr. Heckle and Mr. Jive. What a great name. No grand origin myth here like Papa's, it's born from those beach house sessions, a collective riff that bloomed into funk shorthand. But in a year when post-punk and ska was splintering into early house whispers, Pigbag's horn-fueled optimism feels like the last golden rays. We finished Playlist 21 with a very unusual track from a very unusual visionary band we've met twice before, Japan. If you remember, in episode 29.5, we listened to the 1981 reissue of A Quiet Life, an incredible track, and as I argued, a proto-Planet Earth before Duran Duran were even a thing. But now, we arrive at the band's fifth and final studio effort, Tin Drum. Released on November the 13th, 1981, it was the culmination of their pivot from glam-tinged new wave to something far more elliptical and exotic. A record steeped in David Sylvian's growing obsession with Eastern aesthetics, from the fretless bass lines to the tonal drums that double as marimbas. The album peaked at number 12 on the UK Albums Chart, marking Japan's commercial breakthrough after years of cult status. But let's zero in on the track that heralded this shift. The second single dropped just weeks ahead of the LP on October the 30th, 1981. Visions of China. It clocks in at 3 minutes and 40, a hypnotic groove built on Steve Jansen's intricate percussion, reminiscent of stately ceremonial drumming, as if the band had smuggled a Peking opera kit into the studio. Music credited to Jansen and Sylvian, lyrics solely by Sylvian, and produced alongside engineer Steve Nye from June to September that year. The vocal went down on August the 27th, with final mixes at Air Studios on September the 28th. It charted at number 32 in the UK, a modest dent compared to the album's sleeper hit Ghost later on, which we will definitely be hearing. But it captured the essence of Tin Drum's conceptual core. Sylvian's lyrical gaze towards Mao-era China, blending romance and satire. This is track 13, our final track today. The promo video, shot in those experimental early days of MTV adjacent clips, saw Sylvian as a boy sat in front of the telly with Mao and various pieces of Chinese iconography as he completes a jigsaw, and also features the band in military costumes, a visual shorthand for the album's fascination with Chinese visual culture. As for Tin Drum's cultural ripple, well, it's a mixed ledger, grounded in verifiable echoes rather than legend. Roland Authable of Tears for Fears hailed it outright as an absolute conceptual masterpiece, from lyrics to artwork, just everything, crediting it as a primary spark for their 1983 debut The Hurting. Based on their admiration for the Japan album, The Cure and XTC hired producer Steve Nye for their own 1983 releases The Walk and Mama, respectively. Wild Beast Tom Fleming cited it as a direct blueprint for his band's work, noting, "You've probably heard this record all over Wild Beast's work, especially the later Cynthia stuff." Even Stephen Merritt of the Magnetic Fields geeked out over the Sonics. It features electric guitar sounds previously possible only for Adrian Bellew. The bass is so fretless it sounds like a moaning sea mammal. The gorgeous drums are so tonal they could be marimbas. The Prophet 5 synthesizer sits quietly in the mix, making squiggly noises, and sometimes the violin plays in a manner previously heard only in Chinese opera. That said, the record's Maoist imagery and Western lens on the Cultural Revolution drew later scrutiny for cultural appropriation, commentators noting it might face a harder time nowadays. What endures is how Tin Drum turned Japan from also-ran to influencers, their swan song proving the most avant-garde pop of its year. Tin Drum wasn't just a goodbye, it splintered the band by 1982, with Sylvian launching a solo arc that echoed its melancholy. But in 1981, amid the peeling Mao posters and tonal silences, it felt like escape, romantic, satirical, unapologetically foreign. Next time we're with Japan, we will chase those ghosts. So that is it for Playlist 31. We hope you managed to find some new favourite tracks amongst those 13. But what next? Well, we get fully into November 1981 as the year begins to reach its swan song. And on Playlist 32, it's another moment of kicking the 80s doors wide open as the first 7 songs are biggies. Gone are the specials, but now we welcome back Terry Hall, Linval Golding and Neville Staples as Fun Boy 3. We get all moosey with Modern Romance, who by now have discovered that 80s party formula. Diana Ross has another big moment, as do Dollar and George Benson. And we end in Cambodia with the woman of the hour, Kim Wilde. And that's just the first half. As always, if you can leave us a review on your pod platform of choice, that would be wonderful. And hit subscribe if you haven't already. And I think it's also important to say that, of course, next week is Christmas week. So, from the bottom of my heart, thanks for listening this year. We hit 10,000 listens this year, and sincerely, you've made it all worthwhile. And I wish you a Merry Christmas and a happy, healthy 2026. God bless you all. Take care.